Lindsay Northup-Moore, and I am the Director for Disability Support and here at AU. And although it's so weird to say that because I'm in Pennsylvania right now, I don't know where everyone else is, so I'm not really here at AU, but of course, still working for AU. And then Nicole, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Nicole Nowinski. I'm the Associate Director of Disability Support at the Academic Support and Access Center. So I supervise the team of disability access advisors in our office. So many of you probably have received accommodation letters from our team, from myself. I have a caseload of my own. So we deal every day with a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about and much more. But it's nice to see all of you.
Okay. So for our agenda, before we even get into that, I just want to let everyone know that you can feel free to ask questions as we are going along. You can put them in the chat box. We'll try and keep track of that. And then also if there's a break and you want to speak up and ask a question, we're happy to address that at any time. We very much welcome this. And also, again, just a disclaimer, we're in the accessibility world every day. So if we say something, we tried to make sure we're using the descriptive language, but if we say something that you guys are like, wait, what's that? Feel free to say, hey, hold on, what are you guys talking about? And we'll go back. And so just wanted to put that out there. So agenda for today, we did our intros. We're going to go through what our definition of accessibility is for the purposes of this presentation, because it really means a lot of things to a lot of different people. And then we'll talk about just some general basics on course material accessibility, but there is a wealth of information on CTRL's website, which we're going to point you to for very specific logistical things. Then we'll talk about online learning challenges and universal design for learning. And that's going to be a bigger scope of what we're going to talk about today. And then we'll talk about some accommodation implementation, which is probably, imagine there'll be a lot of questions around that for the online environment. And then we'll do a wrap up and Q&A. So hopefully that will get to all the needs here. Okay, so for our beginning here, defining accessibility, we want to say that we're focusing on students with disabilities for accessibility, but there are a lot of other kinds of accessibility for different individuals, heritage speakers, anti-racist pedagogy. There's a lot of different kinds of accessibility. But for us, we're going to be focusing on students with disabilities. But the great thing is that when you do think about students with disabilities, a lot of the things that help students with disabilities help everybody else too. And that's the universal design component that we'll be talking about. And then the other thing is, accessibility is campus wide, and that's why we're all here today, right? It's not just the job of the accessibility office, but it's the responsibility of everybody on campus, our faculty, staff, our students, our administrators, in all areas. And one of the great things about thinking about accessibility, and that we were really excited to be asked to do this, is that when we think about accessibility, we really provide a sense of belonging for our students. Retrofitting is time consuming, and it also impacts the student experience. When a student enters a classroom, whether it's online or in face-to-face in person, and they don't feel like that classroom was built for them, it's not a great experience from the start. So it's awesome that we're starting this here and now. And also thinking about accessibility when we are looking at our courses, it reduces the need for accommodations. So it reduces the need for us to make accommodations for students, and it creates a more inclusive classroom. So that's just a few things that we wanted to touch on when we're defining accessibility and how we're framing it. A lot of what we're going to be doing today also is talking about how thinking about accommodations that a lot of our students use, and how could a course be designed in a way that the need for those accommodations would decrease. And it's a lot of times can be very simple, small things. Some are bigger and you have to be more thoughtful about. But that's kind of the lens that we're coming at from today. Okay. So the basics, and I think this is when we think about accessibility, I think a lot of us think about, okay, yes, I need to make sure my videos are captioned. I need to make sure I have alt tags on my images. And what does that mean? There's very concrete answers to all of these things, and I didn't want to go through every single one of them because they are really lovely. And CTRL's done a wonderful job of outlining them on their website. And so we have the link here. We can share it with you, and you can take a look there. But for the basics, captioning videos is probably one of the biggest things that you'll be thinking about during this online transition, because you will be making videos for your class. You may be recording your class, all of those kinds of things. And it is really important that you caption. While it isn't always required by law, it is in some instances. It's really just so much easier if when you're making a video, you just start from square one and you're captioning that video. And the easiest way to do that is to create a script for your video. So you're already thinking through what you want to cover in the video, you create your script, you do your video, and then you just use that script to create the captions. It's so much easier than going back and trying to have somebody or yourself type the narrative of the video. You can also use automatic captions that, on YouTube or Kaltura, but it's super important that you go back and check for accuracy, because artificial intelligence captioning is only about 60 to 70% correct. And I think we've all probably experienced that at one time or another when we're watching YouTube or something. And I'm very sorry about that dog barking. So you can use automatic captions, but you have to go back and edit them. And sometimes it can be very simple to do that. And it's a good start, but it's definitely not the end place that we want to get at. And it's definitely not compliant legally. Legally, they have to be 99% accurate. AI is not there yet, but I'm really hopeful that in the next few years it will be, and this will just be easy and the norm. A few other things, making sure you have alt text on your images. So this is just if say you have a website and or even an email and you have an image in there, making sure that you're adding the alt text so an individual who's using a screen reader who can't see that image knows what the image is describing. Consider what colors you're using when you're making a presentation. Using a red is not usually very accessible. It's hard for certain individuals to see. High contrast in some ways can be really great. So if you have a dark background and light writing, which we're not demonstrating here, but that is also excellent. I know that now you can change so many things into like dark mode. And I've even found just for myself that it's so much easier on the eyes. I have all my stuff in dark mode now. So it's thinking about that when you're designing your materials. And then within documents, follow accessible guidelines, using headers rather than making it a certain size yourself. I will get to this question in 1 second, making it a certain size yourself. So you're like, I want to make, I want the title. And so you just make it 30-point font rather than clicking on the actual heading thing that you can do in Microsoft Word. If you use the headings and the titles, then an individual who is using a screen reader will be able to pick out the important parts of that page and understand what the text is below it. Embedded links, it's always, when you are making a link, don't use the HTTP // maybe I got it wrong, but that whole thing, because when someone's using a screen reader, again, it's going to read that whole thing and it's not going to make any sense. So if you can embed your link in something that makes sense. So an example down here is the course material accessibility. We have CTRL provides a wealth of information on their website. It's kind of long. It doesn't have to be that long, but the person who's using a screen reader to get to this is going to know exactly where that link is going to take them. So that's just a little accessibility tip. And so then we have a question down here. What is dark mode? So Outlook and Google and other, and actually just Windows in general and Mac, a lot of them have modes that you can change. So our usual, when you're looking at your screen, if say we're looking in Outlook, everything's white or very light shades, and then there's some blue here, blue there. You can actually switch that now, and it used to be an accessibility thing, but now it's just it's gone all over the place. I think even Facebook now has dark mode, and so the background is black or dark gray, and the writing is light, and it's a lot easier on the eyes to follow. And for us who are now online a lot, it's helpful. So yeah. So that is our just like quick run-of-the-mill basic accessibility. But again, if you where are we?
I'm sorry, something happened. I will get us back to the right slide.
No problem. Okay, no problem. So those are just our basics on accessibility, but I would really encourage you to use CTRL's website to go through those if you haven't made yourself familiar with how to make your materials accessible. So we've got that. And then now we're going to move on to online learning challenges for students with disabilities. So this is kind of why we're here, and this is where our presentation is going to merge into the accessibility piece and tailoring it to our students with disabilities. And I know, Nicole, you were going to start us off here.
Yeah, I'm still learning the screen sharing thing. So for any faculty, it's a learning curve if you're going to do that. So online learning challenges for students with disabilities. So I think, when Lindsay and I were preparing for this, we were even commenting like on our own experience this summer and since the spring of just being in meetings back to back all day, and how that will translate for the student experience. Even though students primarily had a couple months in the spring, but now we're doing like fully everything for the fall. So students with disabilities, they are just going to, for some of them, for many of them, their experience online will be even greater than an average student and the everyday student. So the Zoom and screen fatigue that you and I experience will be could be twofold for students with disabilities. So it's thinking about how you're building your courses and how often you're doing the Zoom or other things live with your students. I think distractibility is a huge thing that so many of our students in general experience, but then students with disabilities as well. So thinking about their home environments, and many of them were planning to come to campus and they do their work in the library or in a specific building on campus, and now they're at their homes or their apartments with other people around or other distractions around, having to be on screen here, and their professor for another course emails them over here. So just thinking about that. Speaking in front of a large group, we hear a lot of times from our students about public speaking in person and how that's challenging. And then looking at all of you, I personally like to do the grid view because I can see everybody, but that can be really intimidating for students, and speaking in front of people they've never met before in person, how that could feel. So thinking about the challenges in that sense. Time management, I think, again, this goes back to, a lot of students had a way of managing their coursework in person, and having to now, we have so many students that have executive functioning issues that they created a way to manage their schoolwork in person, and they now have to shift online. And it's not just your course, it's all of their courses and all of their academics. And it can be a real challenge. Reaching out for help. So we work a lot with our students on, just going to their professor's office hours and how that could be difficult to just walk by their office hour or go by their office hours and say hello. Now, however you're managing drop-in, or office hours virtually, it can take even more initiative that a lot of our students struggle with. So one idea we had was, instead of naming them office hours, maybe you name them student hours, so that students know that it's not just that you're working, probably if you have no students who are going to be there, but you are there to support them in that time. It is their time. So they're not bothering you, or they're not, imposing on your time. So it can be a little bit more, like the dynamic can maybe shift a little bit more in that sense. And the next few slides will kind of address more of these challenges, but these are kind of some of the things that we were thinking of. Lindsay?
Yeah, I think the key thing is we all experience these, and as it says on here, but our students with disabilities just experience them at way higher levels. We're talking about, anxiety. We have a lot of students who have chronic health conditions, migraines, that are like online learning lends itself well in some ways because there is a lot more flexibility, but in other ways, such as the screen time, is really difficult. And can trigger migraines, can make the disability and the condition worse. So, and the distractibility, I mean, I had the dog barking in the background and that distracted me. Imagine if you're at home, you have your parents around here, or your siblings, or, there's so many more things. So while you're already designing this for the general student, keeping in mind that these things are definitely going to be more difficult, and students aren't going to have those routines, even though, in the beginning where the students they're like, oh my God, I have so much free time. It's going to be really hard for these students to create that scheduling. And we are going to be, just so you know, working in the ASAC with our students more on this, and we are going to be reaching out to them more often and encouraging them to schedule appointments with us more often to support them, but inevitably they're going to experience this in their classes.
Yeah, and I don't know if any of you were in the online learning summit yesterday. They talked a lot about the resources available from the academic support side. And just to echo Lindsay, we don't often have the capacity in normal semesters to meet ongoing with a student and their disability access advisor. But we're really offering that as much as we can to our students this semester to really provide some consistency of support, more consistency of support, but like check-in times beyond just the student reaching out to us normally, so that we can help scaffold the support as they're navigating all of their remote courses. So universal design to increase access. So one of the things that we want to put out there is, really thinking about what are the learning outcomes for your course and what barriers may impede their learning. So we know from CTRL that so much is put out there about course design, and I think really thinking intentionally about, in this online environment for students with disabilities, what we said before, are there any improvements or changes that could be made to kind of address some of the things that we're mentioning could go on? And how can I use UDL to eliminate these barriers? So for instance, providing the multiple means of representation, showing information in different ways, different means of action and expression. So are there different ways that students can approach their work or assessments? If your course allows for this, if there's normally a test, is there a way that the student, any student could show you what they know, writing a paper, or something else that can show that they are progressing towards learning outcomes of your course? Multiple means of engagement, so offering options for students to choose from that to keep their interest. So like we do on our Zoom calls, I'm sure all of these opportunities through CTRL are happening. Students can ask questions through the chat function, and modeling that from the get-go, that saying on the first day of class or reinforcing it throughout the semester that if you want to engage in the lecture, you don't have to just speak or raise your hand and for me to call on you. You can post the information or question in the chat box, and that's okay for our classroom, our class forum. And engaging in meaningful feedback. I think that this is one of the most important things, especially in a remote environment where you know, students are really looking for reinforcement and feedback ongoing because they're not going to have the opportunity to come see you in person or their TA in person. So really, in whether it's in writing or returning work or any email, you know, giving feedback as they are progressing through the course is all of this is super important for our students. Lindsay, did I miss something from anything we discussed?
I don't think you missed anything, but I think that the key here is also looking at your course and seeing, like, are there any barriers that might affect a student's learning here? And with the online environment, I actually think we have more opportunities to lessen the barriers, and I think we're going to address those in a couple in the slides coming. But really going through and thinking about, are there ways that I can design my course and I can give the material to students so that they're able to get it in two different ways. Maybe you can give it in the lecture, and then you can also make sure that you're posting your slides online. I think a lot of this does happen in the in-person environment. But you're already teaching online, so you already are going to have these electronic materials. Can you put them online? I mean, that's one of our biggest requests for accommodations is can I have the course materials ahead of time, or like the PowerPoint ahead of time? And, you know, that's not something that we can mandate, and, you know, every professor can teach their class in a different way. But considering the electronic online environment that we're in, and we know that every professor puts in so much preparation to their course, is there any way you can share that information with the students so they can look at it ahead of time and be even more prepared for class? Because a lot of students really want that.
The other thing that I meant to say is, you know, I think there's a lot of unknowns for the fall semester in terms of the online coursework for students. And I think we've heard from a lot of our students with disabilities that they just have a lot of anxiety, whether diagnosed or not, about the fall semester. So as much information that they can know about your course, you know, from the get-go, like if you're doing group work or breakout sessions or anything like that, that they can anticipate and know, you know, what's going to happen. It helps them, you know, feel more comfortable with the progression of your course. So we're just hearing a lot of that, and many students wanted to be in person. That isn't possible. So you know, we're really working with them to, you know, really understand their courses from the get-go and understanding how they can navigate each class to the best of their academic abilities. So does anybody have any questions up to this point? I can't see the question box, Lindsay. I just want you to know.
No, not right now.
Brenda, go ahead.
Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, I was just curious, like, I haven't received any accommodations yet from my students. What is the timeline? Like, would they be contacting your office now? Would it be later, or?
Great question. We just sent out our welcome back email to our main campus students today. So we have been receiving hundreds of requests for their letters today. So they're all starting to receive them as they request them. Okay. And they should start providing them to you as soon as possible. Okay. So we had to make some tweaks once the online decision was made to a couple things in our system, and then we were able to send the call for letter requests out.
Thank you.
And we'll highlight some of those tweaks at the end when we talk about accommodations, because it is going to affect the course accommodations for sure. So we'll do that. And just so for your own knowledge, when a student requests their letter, they receive it within 2 to 3 days. So there's and usually much less, usually within a day. So there's a pretty quick turnaround. So just for your knowledge, if a student says they're requesting their letter, they should have it very quickly.
Yep.
Yeah, I was just wondering, what if a student can't participate in online classes because they have to limit their screen time? Is that an accommodation that you guys will be discussing with the student? Is that something that can be put into a letter?
So that will be that would be something that we would definitely evaluate with the student and figure out, is there a way that we can accommodate them, or, and this is a very rare instance, or is this not the right environment for them? Because we can't change it, right? I will say we have gotten requests for people to do as an accommodation to do things in person, and we're like, no, we can't do that. So we will work with them and we will figure out how we can help. One thing that did come up in the spring that there has been guidance on from Dean Waters about is, and it is on CTRL's website, is guidance around having, making sure that students have their screen on, and giving students the flexibility to not have their screen on, if necessary. So not having a screen on policy, and allowing students to have it on and off as needed, and still expecting engagement, but sometimes just not looking at the screen is beneficial, and students can still retain the information and learn it through auditory. So.
But I think it would be in rare cases, and I'm not going to say all or nothing, that if a student said that they need an accommodation to not participate at all in a course that is synchronous, that would be a very rare accommodation, if at all, that we would consider. Would you agree, Lindsay?
Yeah, so if we had a student who, sorry if I misunderstood the question, if we had a student who said they couldn't participate, then we would come directly to the faculty member and look at the syllabus and talk about how participation is evaluated in the course. Are there other options for participation? And that's a really actually great segue into, I think, the next slide, because, oh no, it's the slide later, but we are going to talk about a little later about how diversifying engagement options for students can help with lowering the need for accommodations, or even asking about not being able to participate, because there's going to be numerous ways for a student to participate and show engagement. And we will get to that for sure. Okay. All right, so moving on, but don't want to shut questions down if people have questions, so keep them coming. Universal design continued here to increase access. One of the, going beyond access, it minimizes barriers, it maximizes learning. We know this about universal design, and critically, and what we've been talking about, critically thinking about the course design, and it decreases the need for accommodations. What I want to talk a little bit about is that decreasing the need for accommodations, because there are so many things that if you think about and are you able to provide flexibility, could completely get rid of accommodations. One accommodation that we are seeing a lot, and I probably all of you are seeing a lot, is the request for flexibility with deadlines. And that one's tough. That one's a really hard accommodation. It's not one that can be blanket decided, like, time and a half on assessments. And that one requires a lot of engagement between the faculty member, the student, and our office when necessary, or when requested, because we're always happy to engage. So when you're thinking about, you're making your course and you are creating, assessments along the way, and you're making deadlines and thinking about, why am I making this deadline? Is it here because it's an integral part of the progression of the course and they have to have this thing done before we can move on? Is it a deadline because I'm trying to assess the students' learning along the way and figure out, do I need to go back and look at something, or can we move forward? Are you avoiding, grading a million things at the end of the semester? All of these are reasons, and there are more that deadlines are created. But when you're coming up with the deadlines, if you can think about, are there ways to, within flexibility, could the students, you know, can you give them 3 days to turn something in instead of 1 day? And so the students can have that flexibility and figure out what they need to do, especially in this online environment when we don't know when the student is going to be able to sit down quietly and do their work. They might only have a certain hours during the day where their house is quiet and they can do their work. And then also just for the students with disabilities, we don't know when something, you know, their disability might flare up and that they need to take the time for their health and then move on in the course. And with the assignment. So if you can provide flexibility with deadlines built into your course, it's a great idea. So just wanted to put that out there as one of the accommodations that we might be able to decrease the need for as we think about designing our courses and making them more accessible. The other thing about the online environment is it is harder for students to minimize the distractions. So, and I also think, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's harder to step away on a Zoom than it is when you are in you know, in a meeting. So it's I think it's like pretty normal. Maybe I'm totally off base here, but you know, if you're in a meeting and you need a bio break, you can leave and you know, and do what you need to do and come back. It's really hard to do that in Zoom. People are like, why are you leaving? Why is your camera off? You know? And so can we build these things in so we're creating a more open environment and a healthier environment for our students? Are there natural parts of your course, even if you're having, you know, I know this is an hour and 15 minutes, which I actually think is long to sit and you know, not have a break. I even thought about, should we have a break? But when we can, can you build in a 5-minute break? Can you say, okay, everyone, we're at a point in the class, we're gonna have 5 minutes, everyone go do what you need to do, and then come back. You know, you can go on the Facebook, you can, you know, go get a snack, you can go pet your dog, whatever you need to do, and then come back. So are there places where we can build this in that will also help our students with disabilities who might need time to, we have a lot of accommodations for students who need to take breaks during class to manage their medical needs. So if we're just building this in and you make it an expectation as we talked about, so students know that it's going to happen, you can put it in your syllabus, you can say it at the first class, you know, every class we're going to take a break at 1:30. And we're going to take 5 minutes and do what we need to do. And that will lessen the anxiety for a lot of students. So just those are some tips that we have, or some things that we've thought about when we're going through the accommodation requests and how some course design different course design could help enhance that. And it's easier to do, I think, in the online environment than in person. So. Okay, next one, is this one me too? Oh yeah, this is, okay, you're getting a lot of me talking. Sorry guys, any questions before I keep going? No? I'm just gonna check. Okay, good. Oh, here's one. Okay. Is there a way to type captions in Zoom? I think we need a software for that. That's a great question. And I always think I know the answer, but then I'm wrong. So there is a caption option. And you can assign someone to do that. There is also I think there's a caption option or like a professional caption option that you have to assign someone and pay for them to do it. So you can certainly also assign someone to do captions in Zoom, but just to be honest, it's really hard. Think about how fast we're talking. And for someone who is not trained to keep up, it's really difficult. The people who do this for their jobs make a lot of money for a reason. So you can do it, but it's really difficult if you're not trained.
But an alternative, I'm assuming, I don't know exactly like the intent behind the question, but I think if you wanted to like have it well, I guess live captioning. Yeah, we do coordinate that for students with disabilities who do need that. So our deaf or hard of hearing students, there will be captioning in their courses. But yeah, it's not something that would easily be able to happen for each and every class. But to capture the information, we have talked about before even this whole pandemic, a universal design thing for any student is to have like a note taker for each of your class meeting times, and just have one person volunteer to do each week, and they can post those to Blackboard or Canvas. That way, everybody could access those.
The follow-up is class discussion on Zoom not accessible. So the answer is it is accessible. Oh, okay. Oh, you got it. Okay. It is accessible technically. And if we need it for students who are deaf or hard of hearing, or for whatever reason need captioning, that will be provided in your course. So you don't have to worry about that. Universal design would be that, yes, we just have captions for every course. Unfortunately, we're just not there yet. I'm hoping that once, AI catches up to, improves itself, we'll be able to just turn it on all the time and meet everyone's needs. Because as we know, captions don't just help students who are deaf or hard of hearing. I don't know about you, but I use captions all the time. And it also really helps our heritage speakers and a lot of other individuals as well. So yeah, great question. Okay, so the next thing, and this really ties into what we were just talking about, but really speaking more in depth about diversifying assessments and engagement. So when you're creating your assessments, the broader part of this, and what really, we've thought a lot about this before, but what's really coming to a head now is that, our office is not able to administer exams anymore because we're not on campus. Oh, Kiho, you have a question?
Yeah, sorry, I want to go back to the closed captioning. I know that both Zoom and Teams allows for closed caption, which is not up to the ADA standards. Mm-hmm. But can we encourage students to use it anyway if they're not requesting this as part of it, an ADA request, so that the English learners and others who may be in a loud room can benefit from the live captioning, which is not perfect?
Absolutely, you absolutely can, and I think it's always a great option. And I appreciate you saying that, because I actually was not 100% sure that Zoom had the AI option. But if it does, that's great. Yeah. Yes, I think always, if you can turn them on, and see what happens, unless they turn out to be really, really bad, which they aren't that bad anymore. I think it's always a good idea. Absolutely. Thank you. Oh, great. There we go. Okay, there we go. Okay, let me see if I can get rid of I can't get rid of that anymore. Oh, well, that's okay. I'm also still learning Zoom here. I've been using it for like 5 months. Okay, so when you're so we've thought a lot about this, and students aren't going to be able to take their exams with our office anymore, and the accommodations for exams are going to be the responsibility of the faculty. And if you haven't heard that before, I'm sorry that I'm the first one delivering that to you, but that is unfortunately, we can't do it in our office right now, but we have an enormous amount of support to provide the faculty, and we're going to get into more of that in a couple later slides. But thinking about that, and it's brought up a lot more discussion within our office and within other faculty members of how can we be really critically thinking about our assessments, the modality of our assessments, and in turn, what are we assessing? So thinking about what you're assessing and how you're assessing it, and are all of the constructs that you're using relevant? So are you using, everything that you are, is a multiple choice exam, for example, tests a lot of other things just besides the knowledge. It tests your working memory, and it tests your ability to decipher just between a few small things rather than thinking about a big picture. Is working memory something that's important to your assessment? It might be, but maybe it's not. And is there another way that you can have the student demonstrate their knowledge without using a modality that impedes their ability to do that? So I hope that makes sense. And I think that one really great option for this is thinking about your assessment and coming up with a rubric of what and your outcomes, and a rubric, and thinking about what kind of, what are the outcomes? How can I'm just going to put those in a rubric. I want the students to be able to show A, B, C, D, and E. And they have to be able to also make these connections with A, B, C, D, and E, or E, F, G, whatever. And have that rubric, and then think about, okay, how can I get the students to this outcome? And are there different modalities for that? Rather than just, okay, I want everyone to write a paper, could a student do a video and still meet the learning outcomes of the rubric? Could a student do a speech and still meet the learning outcomes of the rubric and the course? Can I let the students choose what is going to be the best way for them to demonstrate the mastery of their knowledge? And in that way, you are critically thinking about all the different kinds of learning styles there are, and ways of expression. And also you are, which is, I know has been another big thing, is you're also creating an assessment that will uphold the integrity of the course and and their own thoughts and ideas. So they're not going to be able to look up the answers on the internet, because they are making connections and putting everything together in one piece for you and to grade. And using that rubric for everybody, no matter how they're demonstrating it, is a way to do it. I'll be honest, I'm not the expert on this. This is not my expertise, but it's something that we've been talking a lot about. And we do have some really great people at the university who are really good at this and thinking about this critically. So if you want to learn more, we can definitely help you put in contact with people. But it's something that would help all of our students, but I think it would also help, it also helps our faculty. Because in many times when you're making those kinds of assessments, there's really no accommodations that a student needs. It's going to be up to them to manage their demonstration of the knowledge.
And
so,
oh, sorry, Lindsay.
Go ahead.
I was going to say it's not wouldn't necessarily be making like something easier or like lowering the standards. It's just allowing the students to choose a modality that they think that they can best show you what they know and the knowledge that they have. They still have to produce that for you to assess, but it just is taking away, it is not minimizing or making it easier. It's just giving them the opportunity to choose something that they're better at to show you. So it's just some ideas that we have about that. Sorry, Lindsay, I cut you off.
No, it's fine. No, it's great. And then just the next part is also really thinking about the engagement of your students and how can they participate in multiple ways. So can they participate in asking questions through the chat box and asking questions, verbally through the screen? Can they post on a discussion board? We think about these things in the in-person environment, but I think we have more opportunities now. I think about this student that I had a few years ago who they had a severe stutter and they had a really hard time. They were in a discussion class. They had avoided discussion classes their entire time. And then there was one class that, and it sucks that they avoided the discussion class, but they had, and then they had this one class they needed to graduate that had a lot of discussion. And it was just so incredibly anxiety provoking for the student. And we worked together, we figured it out, we worked with the faculty member. But I just think, like, if the student was in this online environment, it would be so much easier for them because they could participate in their discussion by just writing in the chat box. And it alleviates that. So in many ways, this online environment, if we're thinking critically, we're going to be able to be even more accessible than we are in person. And then, so just thinking about time, we're going to move on quickly here. And because I know I'm sure some of you want to talk about accommodations and how we're going to implement them in the classroom. So Nicole, you want to take it away?
So implementing accommodations, so many accommodations for the fall will be much more seamless or easy to implement in the online classroom. So for instance, we have a lot of students who have a note-taking accommodation where they use some recording technology that is just seamless in their built into their computers. So not really anything that needs to that would be more work. Breaks, we approve breaks for students for a lot of reasons, medical reasons, sometimes attention issues, so many different things where, depending on how your course is built, and if you're putting out there, if you need to go to the restroom or go do whatever you have to do, turn your camera off and you don't have to worry about asking me necessarily. Or if you have a class where you want students to chat to you directly, I'm going to be taking my break for 3 minutes, I'll be back and I'll chat you when I'm back, or whatever it is. But pretty seamless and honestly less disruptive. If there's groups or breakout sessions, maybe when the students have conversations about their accommodations, maybe if you know that you're going to have group work, speak with the student about how that might be navigated with the other students. And then the online environment, we've been talking about this the whole time, provides options to increase accessibility for everyone. So we've talked about removing time limits on certain things. So if there is an assessment that you have and you normally would do that in the class time. So from 2 to 3:30 is when everyone would take the test. Maybe I'm not going to tell people how to do their courses, but maybe you want to do more lecturing and have a window of 3 days where that assessment could be open, that students could take that at any time that worked for them within that time period. Excuse me. So that offers greater flexibility. And we've talked about having note takers if you want that for your course, having students sign up for that each week. Yeah, so I think we can jump to the next slide, Lindsay. Okay, guide to implementing exam accommodations. So we mentioned before that for the fall, or as long as we are doing remote coursework, our office, we're not able to administer exams for students. We don't have that ability, so faculty members will be responsible for doing that. We are being very explicit with students. It's on the accommodations memo that will be sent out. Exactly, how the students need to notify professors about their request for accommodations. They are told that they need to let you know at least 7 days in advance of an assessment that they would like to use their accommodations. If you are notified after that point that a student would like to use their accommodations and you feel that there's difficulty with that, we can definitely be involved in that conversation. We're hoping that there will be ways that faculty can work out managing the accommodations, but we are always here to consult about the assessments for students. I'm going to pull up here, we have an ASAC guide for how to implement exam accommodations. So I'm going to pull this up. It's directly on our website here. And this will be sent out to everybody, but it's our resource. Yep. What did you say, Lindsay?
Can you make it bigger?
Oh, yes.
maybe I'm just, oh, actually, okay, yeah. I think I had mine on a weird setting. Can everyone see it? Yeah, okay.
So every Monday and Thursday, we have it on this page here. We will have an hour of time for consulting with faculty around exam needs. Christian, who many of you probably worked with in the past, he is one of our accommodations coordinators. He will be managing these hours. So that's starting August 31st. So we just have lots of information here on how to navigate the implementation of each accommodation. So extended time. We have some students who are approved for breaks during assessment. So how to implement that. Reduce distraction space. That is something that is self-accommodated because students most of the time will be in a space by themselves. I could see it coming up where if a student says, I don't have a quiet space, like Lindsay said, until 3 p.m. You know, my sibling has school from 9 to 2:30. Is there something that we could work out? Or so that's just something that comes to my mind. Use of computer, students can use their computer, simple function calculator. Students can display their computer on their calculator on their screen. Assistive technology, so speech to text software, it's not compatible with some of the software that many of our students use for exams. So if you do have a student that has this accommodation, we definitely encourage you to reach out to us to in those hours that are offered so that we can kind of go over what accessibility features look like for that. Lindsay, do you have any ones that you wanted to specifically address?
I'm going to get you guys that website. I have it on my one screen. I'm going to move it over to my other screen. Yeah, so we have this on our website. I don't think I have anything in particular to say, but what I want to stress is that we are also here as the ASAC. We're here for a resource, as a resource for you guys as well. We're not just here for students. We're here for you. We also recognize that this is new uncharted territory for many people, including us, and we want to help. And so that's why we have those open office drop-in hours for faculty, but you're also welcome to email us, call us, and ask for a consultation, and we will absolutely do that. That's what we're here for, so we can help with all of that. So I just want to stress that you're not alone. You and your colleagues are not alone. We want to be here and help everybody with this. And
I think the biggest thing is, like Brenda asked a question earlier about accommodation letters. If a student is coming to you for an accommodation and they have not produced a letter to you, you are not obligated to accommodate them in the absence of a letter. So you can refer them back to our office to get that letter. If they are not registered at all, refer them to our office as well, so that we can start that process with them.
So we have another question, and I'm gonna, just give me 1 second, I'm gonna send this over to the chat. Okay, so there's that handout. Are we required to record class discussions on Zoom or our class? So you're not required to record class discussions unless there's an accommodation. So, and students will do that on their own. You don't have to worry about that. But it is actually I think it'd be a really helpful tool. And I think a lot of people are going to end up doing this anyway because of, you know, different students being in different places and time zones and everything. If you can record your class and post it for review, that's fantastic for students, not just students with disabilities. They can go back and review things and watch the lecture. It doesn't mean that you can't require the students to be in class, pending, you know, where they are and all that kind of stuff. But it's always a great option to have the recording for everybody and not just the students with disabilities. So I think that's all we had. And so we have some time for questions. If people have questions, I'm happy to answer them. I know we threw a lot at you, sorry.
Hello?
Hey.
Hi, sorry, can I ask you another question? Well, I kind of had an unusual situation during my summer course. I had a student who had extended time on an exam. And at the same time, because we were remote, I had recorded videos because, again, like you mentioned, students are different time zones and it helps them review and things like that. But I was kind of surprised the student had actually mentioned when we reviewed the test that he had time to pause on the test, go rewatch the video, and then come back. And to me, sometimes I feel that, you know, it's a little bit, you know, I don't mean fairness or any of that kind of things, but when a student doesn't have that extended time, they don't necessarily have that time to kind of go back. Is that a way that accommodations should be used, or is there a way to kind of minimize those kind of I don't know if it's unfair or it's disadvantage for other students, or, you know, that kind of, I was kind of surprised when he told me that, because I wasn't expecting students to use that material in that way. I wanted them to review the material of the lectures beforehand, digest it, understand it, and then be able to apply those ideas, right? So it just seemed like the approach I wanted them to use when they come to a test.
Sure. So I think, you know, the time is for students who they need that time for whatever reason, and we have determined that they need that time. That doesn't mean that they're going to use the time exactly how you expect they're going to use the time. And I don't know was it permitted that any student could go back and look at the lecture or not? So it was.
Yeah, but when a student has, sometimes, you know, I can't remember, it was 2.5 times, you know, 1.5 time or whatever it was. But on a student who had the normal, like I designed the tests so that, you know, they have to think about their materials, kind of compose their answers and kind of do that. So they wouldn't have time to really pause on their test, then go find the video, play it far enough to find that exact spot. And, you know, they don't have quite that flexibility. I know that students are given the time because you guys have talked to them and you guys recognize that that's their needs. But I just, you know, I was just surprised that some students are using it in that way. I don't know if that is designed for students to be able to do that within that time, or if you can give me an idea of the context of what students are using that extra time for. Is it because they have issues with, in terms of just focusing, like you had mentioned, that kind of thing? It's harder for them to have less distractions, so they need that little bit of extra time, or what kind of, you know, benefits do they receive from having that versus what I kind of did not anticipate that they would be using it for?
Kehoe, did you want to say something that was related, or do you have?
Yeah, you know, so in addressing Brenda's question, I think what this says is that you need to clearly indicate the parameters of the test and make it explicit that students are not allowed to access additional information beyond what they've done in preparation. So we have things like the respondents lockdown that allows for that sort of proctoring of tests. And so I think making explicit what that time is used for and not used for, I think is probably important. You know, the settings should be very much like what would happen in a classroom. That you're not allowed to walk out, look at a computer, and then come back and go back to the test. So that's one sort of answer. The other is asking yourself the question, why do I put a time limit on this exam? What is the point of that time limit? Typically, the time limit is there to test one's recallability, how quickly you can recall something. And that may be an important part of your learning outcome, but often that isn't. Often what we want to do is have the students think about and synthesize information which isn't readily accessible by looking at the notes or looking at a book or additional resources. And so that takes the burden off of both the students and you in trying to really define the environment in which they have to take the test. It's a little more work on the part of the faculty because we have to really think about what is a good synthetic question. And so if you really ask the question, why do I have a time limit? I think that'll give you some different approaches to the assessment.
Yeah. Thanks, Kehoe. I think that's excellent. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say we have some, when we do proctor assessments in our office, I know we have some art history professors who provide like the slides for their exam that they would normally show on the screen in the classroom. And they give us specific instructions saying that students are to look at this for 30 seconds and then they have to recall the title, the period, you know, who painted it. And then we will say, okay, so for students who have extended time, we are also going to give them 45 seconds or a minute to look at that. But we are sometimes given that information. Some faculty just send it and they're like, here it is, you know, students can do whatever they want. But that's an example where we have received that before. So I think like Kehoe said, maybe explicitly saying, my expectation is that you are reviewing this video once and then jumping into this question, or however that might be. If that answers your question, Brenda.
Yeah, so that totally makes sense now to me now, but I never ever assumed students would be doing that, right? So that kind of just took me off guard at that time, yeah.
And we think we've seen all the accommodations things, and then we get new questions. So, and students do new things. So we're in that same boat, Brenda, for sure.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Hi, so I've read in some accommodation letters from previous semesters that during exams, like if possible, a paper version should be administered. What if you receive something like that during this fall semester? How do you suggest we go about with giving the test?
So you may see them. I think we're going to try and change the ones that there could be one or two that slide by, but we are going to try and make sure all of our accommodations are up to date that makes sense in this online environment. But if that is the case, or if we have a student who is requesting a paper copy, which definitely has happened, especially more in the spring, we had a lot more students saying they really want to take their exams on paper. It wasn't as much of an accommodation decision as it was is this just reasonable for any student? Could they print it out? Could they take it on paper and send it back to you? Not snail mail, scan it or take a picture of it or something. Or snail mail if you really want. So it did come up, and when I brought it to Dean Waters, she really felt strongly that it was more of this is how the students are used to taking the exams. Is there a way that we can make this happen? Maybe there's not, but I think now that we're in the online environment and the students are expecting to be in the online environment, we can work with them and also work with faculty members.
Thank you.
Sure.
I have a question, because I've noticed this just myself in meetings. Do you all have any recommendations for managing like turn taking in discussions? Because I know that can be difficult for students with lots of anxiety, or students who are deaf or hard of hearing, students who aren't sighted. That can, I guess, pose a challenge. So like, what would be strategies to try and mitigate that?
Nicole, I saw you starting your thing off. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, what I really like is the hand raising, and I think it can be. I mean, I have not taught a class with 50 students myself, so I know that could get like way out of hand. But I think I like that, but I know for faculty it could be harder to manage. And I think. You know, I think it could be something with the chat function as well, where if a student has a question, or wants to comment, that they like post that in there, and the faculty member can just go down the line and call on them. I don't know, Lindsay, if you have any other suggestions.
I think, so as we always say, cold calling is never a great idea. We don't like to cold call on anybody. But if we do need to hear from people and we are expecting everyone to take turns, I think a great practice is to have that expectation. So everyone knows, I want everyone to contribute to this conversation. I'm going to go first, and then, I'm going to go through my screen, and we can, you're going to be next and you're going to be next. And also, so I'm going to say, I'm going to go first and Andrew's next. and then Nicole's next, because I know that they're next in succession. And then once I go, then Andrew's going to go, and then I can also let the next person know that they're next. So giving people an idea that they're coming up next and a few moments to prepare is really helpful.
And their faculty can also post that in the chat box, like the order of like who's going to speak or something.
Mm-hmm. And also giving people the option to say, I'm not ready yet. Can you come back to me? Because not everyone, I know there have been times people have called on me in meetings and I'm like, ooh, I'm not ready yet. Please, can I have some more think time? So.
That's helpful, thanks.
Yeah, I also think that if you can come up with those questions in advance and put those out before the students come to class, and give students opportunity to actually read the answers, especially those who are learning English as a second language, or who are very nervous about speaking in front of crowds, being able to read, and it'll be easier online than in person, to be able to read the answers, I think is also creating that space for that to happen is also very helpful in terms of getting everybody to participate.
Absolutely, definitely.
Other questions for us?
Okay.
All right.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it. Nicole, do you want to go down real quick to the last slide, just so people know we didn't steal this information? Just let you know that's where we got some of our information. But thank you all, and please don't hesitate to contact us or our office. We're always here to consult and to be partners. That's very much what we want to continue doing. So thanks.
Thank you, everyone.